This is continuous coverage.
Continuous coverage
In the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell from the Hidden Killers podcast.
We are on day number 4 now of live trial audio from the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell. We are going into segment 1. The first segment and most of the morning testimony comes from Lori's friend, Melanie Gibb. A very interesting day of testimony, to say the least. Take a listen.
Okay, we'll go on the record on KCR 22-21-1624, State of Idaho versus Noreen Vallow. Continuing jury trial today. I believe all the jurors are here and present today.
Yes, Your Honor.
And all have completed their juror affirmations.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Before we get started here, I will remind everyone there's a courtroom conduct order in place for both here and the remote viewing locations in Ada and Madison counties, and electronic devices are not allowed to be used to record, photograph, or transmit any sounds, images, or video from these proceedings in any of the locations. I appreciate the public's continued compliance with those conduct orders. At this time, the state is continuing with its case in chief, and I believe we're ready to bring the jurors in for further witness testimony. I'll note the state is here represented by counsel. The defense also is present, as well as the defendant. Is the state ready to proceed with trial this morning?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Blake. Is the defense ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thanks. Let's have the jurors brought in then. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you all for your continued service. This time the state is prepared to call its next witness. Who's going to be examining the witness?
I will be, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Blake, you can call your next witness then.
The state will call Melanie Gibb.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
All right, if you'd please follow the instructions of the bailiff to your witness seat there. All right, let me just instruct the witness here. When answering questions, please use verbal responses such as yes or no, because we're making a court record. Also, please try to avoid speaking at the same time as any attorney that's questioning you. I do have one other inquiry to make before you start your examination, Ms. Blake, of the witness. There have been, there's an exclusion of witnesses rule in effect at this time. Have you observed any of the trial testimony before coming here today?
No.
Okay, have you listened to any of the audio of any of the trial testimony posted? Was that no? Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Ms. Blake, with that in mind, you can inquire of the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Ms. Gibb, sometimes we've had a hard time picking up the witnesses, so the court reporter may instruct you or tell you if she's having a hard time hearing you, okay? Would you please state your name for the record?
Melanie Gibb.
Ms. Gibb, do you know an individual named Lori Vallow?
Yes.
How do you know her?
I met her in Arizona at a church event.
Do you recall approximately when you met her?
October 2018.
And when you met her at that event, did the two of you end up forming a friendship?
Yes.
Do you know an individual named Chad Daybell?
Yes.
And how do you know him?
I met him at some of different events that I've been to.
Do you recall approximately when you would have met Mr. Daybell?
I think I met him maybe a year or two before I met Lori.
When you first met Mr. Daybell, did the two of you strike up a friendship at that time?
Just a casual introduction to each other.
After your first meeting with Mr. Daybell, did the two of you stay in contact?
Whenever we would see, it was very periodically. It was not like we communicated, as friends or anything. If we engaged, seeing each other, we might say a few words to each other, but not a whole lot of contact.
And after you first met Lori, did the two of you continue communicating from that first meeting?
Yes.
Did you stay in constant contact or consistent contact?
Yes.
Have you ever met or did you ever meet an individual named Tylee Ryan?
Yes.
And where did you meet her?
I met her at Lori's house.
Do you recall approximately when that would have been?
I would say within a week or two after I met Lori.
Did you ever observe Lori and Tylee together?
Yes.
What were you able to observe about their interactions?
She seemed upset and frustrated with Lori pretty much most of the time.
So, and when you say she, you're referring to Tylee?
Tylee, correct.
Did there appear to be some tension in that relationship?
Yes.
Did you ever meet an individual named JJ Vallow?
I did.
Yes. And where would you have met him, if you recall?
Same place, Lori's house.
Do you recall approximately when you would have met him?
Within a week or two after meeting her.
Did you have occasion to observe Lori and JJ's interactions with each other?
I did.
And what observations were you able to make of those interactions?
So sometimes I would watch her with him, and she was very affectionate and loving to him. I watched her sing a song to him as she was going to put him to bed. She seemed to care a lot about him. And other times, as I got to know her as time went on, he seemed to, frustrated, and so the connection, maybe wasn't as I didn't see them interacting as much the same way. She was distracted a lot, so I don't know how to explain it very well, but it was, she was just trying to help him, trying to settle down or whatever, but.
So, from your observations, JJ and Lori appeared to interact more when you had first met JJ.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And it seems like those interactions declined over time.
I would say a little bit. But.
And I think you indicated from your observations, Lori was busy with some other things, or.
Yeah, she was distracted a lot.
Distracted. After first meeting Lori, we've talked about that you stayed in contact with her. How often would the two of you see each other?
Sometimes it was daily or several times a week in the beginning, just in the very beginning, yeah.
And when you say in the very beginning, do you recall approximately how long the two of you would interact that frequently?
I would say until January, and then when she started moving, then I didn't see her as much or talk to her as much.
And when you say January, do you recall what year that would have been?
2019.
Did you and Lori live fairly close to each other?
I would say within 25 minutes from each other.
And did the two of you talked about you'd get together.
Mm-hmm.
Did you also speak to her over the phone during those times?
Correct.
Did you also message with her, text message or otherwise?
Yes.
Ms. Gibb, I would instruct you again, if you could just wait until the question is completed before you answer, and I understand it can be nervous to be there. It's just easier for our court reporter if it's just a back and forth exchange, so thank you.
And you indicated, I think, that after she started moving, could you explain what was going on there?
So about January, she decided to leave, and I believe she first went to Alex's house, or maybe Hawaii. They kind of were near the same timing, so she decided to leave and stay with him, and then she went to Hawaii, and then eventually she went to Texas. So she went to 3 different places, and then she finally went back to Arizona at the very end as her stay that I knew her in Arizona.
Do you know, you indicated she'd traveled around starting in January. Do you recall when you say at the end, approximately when the end was that she ended up, what time period she was moving around?
So January, February, March, April, May, and then July. I know she was back when Charles was killed in July, so I knew she was back in Arizona by July. So all the way from January to July, she moved around several times.
And while she was moving around, did you stay in contact with her?
Yes.
Was that frequent contact? Do you recall approximately how often you'd speak with her or text with her?
It was inconsistent, but it was pretty frequent at the same time. So it wasn't like a consistent daily basis, but it was often.
And after meeting Lori, you indicated you met her in October of 2018. Did the two of you end up taking a trip to Utah?
Yes.
And who else went with you?
There was, I don't know, about 5 or 6 ladies. I can't recall their names right now.
And that's just fine, just what you can recall.
I can't recall their names.
So there were 5 or 6 ladies that went to Utah together.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Where did you go in Utah?
We went to St. George, Utah.
And what were you headed there for? Was there a reason?
There was a conference there.
And do you recall if Chad Daybell was also at that conference?
He was.
Did you observe a meeting between Chad and Lori?
Yes.
Do you know, had they ever met before?
No.
Were you there when they first met?
I believe so. I was there with her the whole time. Mm-hmm.
Did they, how long was the conference that you were at?
It was the weekend, so it was like a Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday most people went home, so it was that weekend.
And do you recall if Chad Daybell was there for the entirety of the conference?
He was there Friday and Saturday.
Were you and Lori there Friday and Saturday as well?
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I mean, we were in the area till Sunday. We stayed at somebody's home, but the conference was Friday and Saturday, and it could have been a Sunday evening, but I can't recall that right now. But he was gone by, if I remember, he was gone by Sunday morning or Saturday night, something like that.
Were you able to observe Lori and Chad together throughout the time that they were both there?
Yes.
And what, if any, observations did you make of their interactions?
They were very friendly to each other, very interactive, talking a lot about some of their ideas and beliefs that they had at that time. And so they were, there was definitely attraction in the beginning, right from the beginning. So.
And did you specifically observe any of Lori's actions towards Chad or how her demeanor appeared?
She seemed very interested in him, like someone that would meet somebody they're attracted to. She seemed flattered by him and very enticed by the conversation and, flirty-like. I would say a little flirty-like as well.
And do you know what Chad Daybell did for a living?
He was an author and a publisher and also a sexton.
And had you ever read any of his books?
I have.
Do you know if Miss Vallow Daybell had read any of his books?
She had.
And do you know if she'd read those books prior to meeting him?
She only read, I think, just a few, but she hadn't read all of his books. And I don't know if she made the connections yet of who he was with the books. I'm not sure about that.
And you indicated that you saw them speaking and they appeared to have some shared interests?
Correct.
And specifically with some religion, some religious talk?
Correct.
Do you recall if they told you anything regarding the two of them?
Yes.
And what was that?
He expressed to her that he believed that they had been married in multiple probations on this.
I'm going to object as to hearsay, Judge.
What's the response from the state?
Your Honor, it's the statement of a party opponent.
Not this opponent.
It's a statement of a co-conspirator.
All right, I'm going to overrule the objection under Rule 801D2E that does allow statements of co-conspirators in furtherance of evidence of a conspiracy. That's how that's allowed, Ms. Blake. I would indicate, though, that I think there may be some additional foundation before getting further into this issue as to whether those statements are allowed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Gibb, did you have conversations about their first meeting with Chad Daybell?
Have conversations with him? I'm sorry, I'm not understanding.
Did you ever speak to Chad about the first time he met Lori?
Most likely, I just don't remember that exact moment.
So after the first meeting, did you speak to Lori about her meeting Chad?
Correct, yes.
And when you were speaking with Lori, what, if anything, did she indicate to you that she and Chad had talked about with regard to the two of them?
She shared with me that he told her that they had been married in another time period.
And did she tell you what she believed with regard to that?
She did believe that. She had already had the belief system that this multiple lives, as they would call it, she'd already believed that before she physically met him.
And backing up a little bit to that, how had Miss Vallow Daybell ever told you anything regarding her beliefs about a prior probation or multiple creations?
She wasn't quite clear in her understanding at that point. She felt, and she shared with me, that she had been married to a prophet from the Book of Mormon named Moroni.
And did she share this information with you before she ever met Chad Daybell?
Yes.
After that conference, did you end up staying in contact with Chad Daybell?
Yes, I talked to him, communicated somehow, very periodically, not very often.
And I think you already indicated you and Lori would communicate quite frequently after that.
Correct.
Do you know if Lori and Chad stayed in touch after that conference?
Yes, they did.
And how do you know that?
She would tell me that they talked and how often they talked, and I often saw her on the phone talking to him. Occasionally I could hear his voice, but she'd always indicate to me she was speaking to him.
When they first met, do you know if Lori was married?
Yes.
And who was she married to?
Charles Vallow.
Do you know if Chad was married?
Yes.
And who was he married to?
Tammy Daybell.
Do you know if their spouses were still alive?
They were.
And we touched a little bit on the idea of multiple probations.
Correct.
When did you first learn of that term?
Probably when I started interacting with Lori is when it really began to be introduced to me.
And who started to introduce that to you?
Lori, and then Chad, but mostly through Lori, through Chad. He would explain it a lot more than she knew of it.
So, would Lori tell you that she and Chad talked about the multiple probations?
Yes.
And what was your understanding of what Lori and Chad believed regarding multiple probations?
Their definitions changed the longer they knew each other, but in the beginning it was believed that in this earth you could come back multiple times, so you may live in a certain earlier time in the world, and then several times, depending on you as a person. It would be different for everybody.
After Chad and Lori met in October of 2018, do you know the next time they saw each other in person?
I believe it was 2 weekends later. He came to town for another event that was in Arizona.
Did you attend that event?
I did.
Were both Lori and Chad present?
They were.
Do you recall if there was another get-together held separate from the event?
Yes. At Lori's house, there was like a little meeting right before the conference.
And do you recall where that meeting took place?
At Lori's house.
Did you observe Lori and Chad together during that meeting?
I don't think he was there. I'm not remembering that. He could have been, but I don't remember.
Did you observe Lori and Chad together during that weekend?
Yes.
And do you recall the context of where you observed them together?
So they were at the conference, and I saw them interacting. And then whatever time he arrived at her house, and he ended up staying at her house.
So your understanding was Chad stayed at Lori's house in Arizona?
That's right.
Do you know if Charles was present during that?
I believe he was out of town.
Do you know if Charles and Lori were still married at that point?
They were.
Do you know if Chad was still married at that point?
Yes, he was.
Do you recall Lori telling you anything in November regarding she and Chad's relationship?
Yes.
And what did she tell you?
She told me that they had been married, I believe, 4 or 5 times. And she would go into different details with me about who she was, what character she was, and what character he was.
Do you recall if she said anything to you about going to the temple?
Yes.
And what did she tell you regarding going to the temple?
She would tell me that, yes, that weekend that he came to Arizona, that they met in the temple together, and they were somewhere in there, like in just like maybe a waiting area room, that they were sealed together by, I believe Moroni was there, and possibly, I believe she said Jesus Christ, and that relationship they had multiple lives, it was kind of like a reunited again. They got to be sealed there. It wasn't in a sealing room officially done by the church or anything like that.
And can you explain a little bit about the relevance of being sealed?
The teachings of our church talk about when you're sealed to a companion on this earth, that you are sealed for time and all eternity.
And when you say the teachings of our church, are you comfortable sharing what church you're a member of?
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Did Lori share with you how she felt towards Chad at that point?
Yes.
And what did she tell you?
She told me, they very much loved each other. They loved each other, in previous mortal probations. There was a lot of affectionate feelings she had for him.
Did she indicate to you anything about whether or not they were going to be open about their feelings for each other?
She just shared how they felt with me. She was open with it with me.
Do you know if they were sharing this information with other people?
Just probably people in their small group of circle. I wouldn't think anybody else.
Outside of multiple probations, did Chad let me back up. Did Lori ever indicate anything about having a special mission here on Earth?
Yes.
And what did she tell you about that?
She felt that she was part of the 144,000, and then as she developed her relationship with Chad, she felt like they were the head leaders of it.
And when you talk about the 144,000, can you explain a little bit about what that would mean?
It's reference from Scripture and the Bible and the Doctrine and Covenants about a group of 144,000 that would be here during the return of our Savior, and they would help do a great mission of missionary work throughout the world. And they would have, a lot of a spiritual endowment from on high.
So if someone were to be the head of that 144,000, would that be a pretty high calling?
Absolutely.
Would that be a position of pretty significant power?
Yes.
And when you talk about they may have shared this with their inner circle or their close friends, do you know who that would have included for them?
Yes. It would have included Sulema Pastenis, Serena Sharp, Christina Atwood, Nicole, forgot her last name, Melanie Pulowski, and I believe she told her sister later on, and I don't know how much she shared with her family. I believe that's, and Alex, I don't believe, let's see. Those are the main people.
And when you say Alex, Alex who?
Alex Cox, her brother, Lori's brother.
Do you recall approximately when Lori started talking about being part of the 144,000 or the head of the 144,000?
Right when I met her.
And then I think so. And I guess I should break this down. I kind of asked a compound question there. So she first starts talking about being part of the 144,000 when you first meet her. Would that be correct?
Correct.
And then I think you'd already indicated after she met Chad, she indicated that she and Chad were the heads of the 144,000 or the leaders.
Correct.
Do you recall approximately how long after meeting Chad she started telling you that?
Within weeks, probably.
Do you recall Lori ever telling you about a light and dark scale?
Yes.
Did she ever explain to you what the light and dark scale was?
She did.
And what did she tell you regarding that?
She told me that people that were light were people that before they came to this planet, when we lived in a pre-mortal realm, basically our spirits lived there before we physically came here, that those that signed contracts and made agreements with the Savior were light, and those that were dark were those that signed contracts with Satan.
Do you recall when she first started telling you about light and dark, the light and dark scale?
It was sometime after she met Chad, that few weeks, when she met him. I would say probably pretty immediate. It feels like it was like it could have been possibly that weekend or just days after that, after she met him.
And when she would tell you these things, would she also essentially be teaching you about this?
Correct.
Did you observe her teaching any other people these things?
Yes.
And do you recall who else you observed her teach these things to?
I saw her teach them to the girls that I mentioned earlier, her brother, and just a few other friends that I did a podcast with.
Did the teachings about light and dark evolve over time?
They did.
What else did Lori end up telling you regarding someone that was dark?
I'm sorry, repeat that again.
What else did Lori tell you regarding someone that was dark?
At first it was, they were working under the contract of Satan, and so they were more on that dark side, and then it would change, often more and more, but
could someone switch from being light to dark or dark to light?
I believe so. I believe that's my memory, yes.
And just backing up a little bit, when we talk about that inner circle, do you recall if Brandon Boudreaux was part of that circle?
Do you mean like sharing the beliefs with?
Yes.
Or no, we didn't share. She didn't share, or Chad didn't share with him any of that information that I know of. I mean, she could have, but I don't remember it.
Do you recall Brandon ever being at any meetings or gatherings where you were there?
I don't recall that.
Did you ever talk to Brandon about anything Lori was telling you?
No, not during my friendship with Lori, no.
What about Charles Vallow? Was he present for any of the teachings or the gatherings or the meetings?
No.
Do you believe that Lori would have considered him part of an inner circle?
No.
Did Lori ever tell you anything with regard to an individual being possessed?
Yes.
And what did she tell you regarding that?
So my first experience with her sharing that with me was, I recall she was in, I believe it was the second house that I met her in. So it was probably, that January time of 2019. And she first started telling me she was in the backyard of her house. She came in and she started sharing all the information she just heard from Chad. Chad let her know that Charles Vallow was taken over by an evil spirit. And that was the first time she had heard of it. And then, that made him dark, according to them.
And that was in January of 2019?
I believe that is correct.
Did Lori talk to you about a dream she had had?
Yes.
And what did she tell you regarding a dream she had around that time?
So she shared with me that Charles was getting ready to go to Texas, and I don't know if he was there already, but that she had saw him in a car accident. I believe JJ might have been with him in the car accident, but that he died in it. And so he would not be coming back home by January 1st.
And do you know if JJ was with Charles during that time?
He was.
And do you know if JJ would have been traveling back with Charles?
Yes, he was.
Do you know if Charles was in an accident at that time?
He was not.
Did you ever talk to Lori about the fact Charles was not in an accident?
Yes, I did.
What did she tell you regarding that?
I asked her what happened. You shared that you thought he was going to pass away. And she said he didn't because Satan interfered with the plan.
And when she talked about the plan, did she tell you whose plan it was?
She would talk about just from her own experiences. Often she would either have what she would call revelation about different experiences with Charles, or maybe she would also talk about her experiences with Chad and how they envisioned getting together, that their spouses would pass away, so that was the plan that was revealed to them. They believed that their spouses would pass away.
With the idea being that once their spouses passed away, they could be together?
Correct.
Based on what Lori was telling you, was it your understanding as well, because Charles was dark, he would need to pass away?
Correct.
Do you recall Lori ever talking to you about castings?
Yes.
What did she tell you regarding castings?
So she would say that she was trying to understand how to get these evil spirits out. And so her attempt to do that was to have like a prayer where she would, like you maybe would read from the scriptures, where you would try to encourage the spirit to come out by the power of God.
Did you ever participate in any castings or observe them?
Yes.
Do you recall when that would have been? Approximate, if you can remember.
Probably January, February 2019 is after, she learned that Charles was dark. So sometime after that.
And I apologize because you may have already said this, but was Charles the first individual that you ever heard Lori call dark?
Yes.
Do you recall where that casting would have taken place?
The first time I recall was at Sulema's house.
Do you recall who was present for that?
Lori, Sulema, Christina, Nicole, Serena, and me.
And those are some of the same individuals you'd previously mentioned, is that
Yes,
correct?
yes.
And you talked about castings being kind of a prayer. Was there any other element to the castings?
I guess so. It was definitely out of context for what I would, see anybody talk about in a spiritual level in any religion, but they would use terminology that to me sounded kind of like energy work. And so they would try to share words like disconnect or cords, like a cord was something you connect your spirit to your body, something like that. They use different elements and words. I didn't use those type of words. I just talked about, my relationship with Christ. And so I don't recall exactly how everybody spoke those words, but it was their attempt to help convince the spirit to leave the body.
And so to back up a little bit, when we talk about to convince the spirit to leave the body, would that be the evil spirit or the presence that had come in, or would that be the actual individual spirit?
It would be the spirit that took over that particular person's body.
Do you recall what Lori told you regarding where the original spirit from that body was?
In the beginning, it was, they would be, I believe it was they were either in the spirit world or spirit prison. I can't remember in the beginning. That's where they would be stuck sometimes between this world and that world. It kind of changed a lot, so I'm sorry if I'm not real accurate, but it was either they were on the other side, that they had moved on in the spirit world, or either somehow they were stuck or something like that.
And you're just fine. I'm just asking for what you recall.
Okay.
And I recognize it's been some time.
Yeah.
With regard, so what she told you, though, is the original spirit is out of the body.
Correct.
The physical body is still alive.
Correct.
And another entity or spirit is in that body.
Correct.
Do you recall what she told you regarding if the other spirit, the evil spirit, the entity is cast out of the body, what would happen to the body?
So the first time they thought they were able to cast out this first spirit that took over Charles's body, whose name was Ned. When that spirit left, so they weren't sure how it worked. And so after they believed Ned left, then they would see that Charles was still alive. And then they would come up with another idea that maybe another spirit, and then they come up with another name that spirit was the one that took over his body.
And when you say they would come up with, this wasn't something that you were told all at once then?
Oh, no.
So as time went on, teachings evolved?
Absolutely.
And you refer to when Ned leaves Charles' body, another entity or spirit comes in.
Correct.
Did they give that a name that you recall, or did Lori ever refer to that entity by any name?
Yes.
And what was that?
Then after Ned, it was Garrick, I believe. Garrett, maybe Garrett.
And then what happened with regard to Garrett?
Then he supposedly was cast out. And then after that, another one, if I think it's the final one, was something like Heaplos, something like that.
And I think you said you participated in a few castings. Did you participate in any other castings regarding Charles?
Yeah, there was several with Charles, yes. Mm-hmm.
Were those castings done as new spirits would come in?
Yes.
Do you recall if Lori indicated whether or not the original spirit could ever come back into the body?
No, I don't recall that.
Do you recall if they told you anything, do you recall if Lori ever used the term zombie?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when she used that term?
It wasn't in the beginning, but I would say weeks after the original idea that someone taken over the body, they just started using that terminology. I would just say weeks after that.
And with that, you talked about participating in several castings on Charles. We talked about who was at the first one. Do you recall if it was the same individuals at the next casting?
There could have been not different people generally, but just maybe less of the group. I know that there was another lady, but I don't even remember her name anymore, but I think she was there very shortly.
Do you recall if Lori was present for all of the castings you were at?
Yeah. Yes.
And was she present?
Yes.
Just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you recall if Chad was present at any of the castings?
I can recall one. It could have been more, but I can recall one.
And the one that you recalled Chad at, was that a casting for Charles?
Charles had already passed away. It was right after his death.
Do you recall who else you did castings for or participated in castings?
I'm not quite sure. It feels like it could have been Brandon Boudreaux, but that's what I can remember.
Do you recall if Lori ever told you that Brandon Boudreaux was dark?
Yes.
Do you recall if she ever told you whether or not he had an evil spirit in him?
Yes.
And did she indicate that he did have an evil spirit?
She did.
Do you recall if Lori told you anything else about Brandon Boudreaux?
Yes, so it evolved. So he was, I believe he was dark from the beginning. I could be wrong on that, but that's my recollection. And then he became a very high level dark. So the darkness kind of evolved into they had multiple lives as well. And then he was supposedly part of Hitler's group during that regime. So he just kind of it just evolved like that.
Do you recall if you participated in castings for any other individuals?
I don't recall.
And I think you indicated the casting that Chad participated at would have been after Charles' passing?
Yes.
So to the best of your recollection, would that have been the one for Brandon Boudreaux?
That's what my recollection is.
And outside of the castings, were you ever told that anyone else was dark?
Yes.
Do you recall who else you were told was dark?
So it was Charles. That was Brandon. Her brother, not Alex, but another brother of hers. Eventually her dad. and then Tylee, then Kay, then at the very end, JJ. And just random people that I can't recall, but those are the ones that I'm recalling at this moment.
Do you recall if you were ever told anything by Lori about Tammy's, whether she was light or dark?
If she was considered dark, it was right before she passed, so.
Were you ever told, with regard to Tylee being dark, did Lori ever tell you whether or not an evil spirit had entered Tylee?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when that would have been?
It was sometime between probably February or March to June, somewhere. I believe when she was in Texas, maybe she shared with me when she was in Texas, which you probably can recall better when she was in Texas than I can, but it's probably like in May or April whenever she was there. That's what it feels like. That's what it was.
Do you recall approximately when, well, actually, let me back up. Did she ever tell you if JJ was taken over or possessed by an evil spirit?
Yes, she did.
And do you recall approximately when that would have been?
Sorry, I'm getting my was it September 2019? Is that when I was? Yeah, September. September.
In 2019?
Yeah.
And was that the first time you'd heard of JJ being possessed?
Yes.
And you'd mentioned that there was a casting done after Charles had passed away. Do you know when Charles passed away?
I believe it was July 11th, 2019.
And you indicated previously, I believe, that Lori had talked about how both Charles and Tammy were supposed to pass away.
Correct.
Do you know what she told you regarding Tammy passing away?
She learned from Chad that he knew years ago that she would be passing away, early in her life.
I believe you already testified that Lori had moved back to Arizona before Charles passed away.
Correct.
Were you in contact with Lori when she came back to Arizona?
Yes.
Did you, in fact, stay at her house in July of 2019?
I did.
Do you recall what day you stayed at her house?
It was, I believe, the 10th or the night. Spend the night and 10th, something like that.
Around the 9th or 10th?
Yeah.
At some point, were you going to stay there longer?
No, I just periodically stayed with her, but I didn't have a agenda or anything.
After you had left, do you know if anyone else ended up staying the night at her residence?
Yes, I was told Alex was coming the next morning or the next day.
Do you know if that would have been the night before Charles died?
Right, correct.
Did Lori tell you why she was going to have Alex stay there?
She told me that he needed to stay there to protect her because Charles was going to kill her.
Did Lori ever tell you how Charles died?
She did.
What did she tell you?
She told me that when he came into the house, he was argumentative with her. She had JJ in the car. She had his cell phone. She told me his cell phone was in the car that JJ was in, and that she said that the spirit told her to pick up the phone and grab it. She ran into the house, and he was really angry that he took her phone, and they were yelling and screaming. He was threatening her, she told me. and Tylee came out with a baseball bat. She told me to protect herself or her mom, or felt the need to protect them, and that it got heated, the conversation. And Alex interacted with him, and it became very argumentative. He said that he went to get his gun to protect them, and then he shot him.
And when you say he shot him, who shot Charles?
Alex.
Did Lori tell you whether or not she witnessed the shooting?
I don't think so.
Did she indicate that she was present for the altercation?
Yes.
Do you recall if Chad Daybell ended up visiting sometime after Charles' death?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when that would have been?
I would say within a week or two. I don't recall the time or day.
Did you observe Chad and Lori together when he visited after Charles' death?
Yes.
Were you able to make any observations as to how Chad seemed?
They both seemed very happy.
And when you say they both, was that Chad and Lori?
Correct.
And when we talk, you talked about she took his phone. Are you referring to, who is the she?
Lori said she grabbed his,
and when you
Charles's
say,
cell phone.
Did Lori tell you where Tylee was during the shooting?
I just know she was around. I don't recall her expressing. She could have. I can't recall it right now who was present. I just know Alex was.
Do you recall if she told you where JJ was during the shooting?
My memory seems to be either he was in the car, or I know at some point she took him somewhere, but it might have been afterwards. I just don't recall right now.
Did anyone make any indication to you regarding feelings of Charles being dead?
No, I mean, you mean like sad feelings, or?
Yeah, any indication of feeling sad?
The appearance was not sad.
Did anyone indicate being happy or relieved that Charles was deceased?
If there was a portray of happiness and excitement, yeah.
Prior to Charles passing, do you know if Chad and Lori had stayed in contact with each other?
Yes.
Do you know how frequently they would communicate?
Multiple times a day, that is my understanding.
Did you ever observe Lori with more than one cell phone?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately how many cell phones you had seen her with?
At least 2, maybe 3.
Did she ever tell you what she used those phones for?
She had one phone just for Chad, and then her regular cell phone, and I can't remember. It seemed like she got another one.
Did Lori ever tell you whether or not she and Chad would meet up? Would ever meet while Charles was still alive?
Yes.
Did she tell you where they would meet?
One time she said they, after visiting her, or right after I visited her in Texas, she was to meet with him. And I believe they were in a hotel, according to my memory, and they were to go to temples together. That's what she said. There was another time she left town, but she indicated she went to Salt Lake, but my guess is she didn't. I don't know. She indicates she went to Salt Lake, so I don't know if they met up there or what happened there. She didn't tell me if they got together there, but.
I'm going to object, move to strike. It looks like this is speculation. She doesn't know what Lori did.
I will sustain that objection, so I'll instruct the jurors to please don't consider that previous response as to the speculative answer.
Did Lori ever tell you directly that she and Chad would meet at hotels or motels?
Yes.
And did they actually meet did she tell you that they met at hotels?
Yes.
Did she tell you that they would meet at motels?
I don't remember the wording exactly.
One of the two?
Yeah, right.
Did Lori ever indicate to you whether or not she and Chad were engaged in an affair?
She would just share that they were intimate.
Was this while Charles was still alive?
Yes.
Was this while Tammy was still alive?
Yes.
Did Lori indicate whether or not she thought it was okay that they were engaging in intimate relations?
She did. She felt it was according to God's will.
And did she tell you, ever expand on why she believed it was according to God's will?
Yes. She explained that because they had been married in multiple lives and they had a mission together, that it was okay.
And when we talk about her having a mission, did she ever talk to you about her mission to lead the $144,000 in relation to her children?
She indicated that she was a part of that group, the $144,000, and at some point everybody in her family would pass on just because of tribulations. At some point she shared that with me, probably in the very beginning.
Did Lori ever indicate any concerns to you about her ability to continue to care for JJ?
I believe, just right before he was killed, she just indicated he was difficult to handle, and so it was hard for her to do that and to be with Chad. So something in that communication like that.
Did she ever indicate a desire to quit caring for JJ or to get rid of him?
She did.
And what did she indicate to you?
She indicated that she was going to ask Kay if she could watch him from now on.
And going back a little bit, when was the last time that you saw Tylee?
Between July, before they left to Idaho. So she left, I think, in October, September, August. I don't know, July or August, whenever, right before, probably they left to go up to Idaho.
And do you recall approximately when they left to go to Idaho?
Maybe August, beginning of August 2019.
And when you say they, do you know who went to Idaho?
Lori, Tylee, JJ, and
What?
Alex. Alex went up there too.
And when you say Alex went up there too, do you recall if he moved at the same time as Lori?
Around the same time. It seemed like he might have gotten there maybe a week. I know she went to visit to find an apartment. It seems like he might have been there a week or so before. I know it's just around the same time.
Once she left to Idaho, did you ever speak to Lori on the phone?
I did.
When you would talk to her on the phone, did you ever hear Tylee or JJ or speak to one of them?
I heard Tylee in the background.
Do you recall if that was close in time to their move?
They were already moved in their apartment in Idaho.
After seeing Tylee before they moved, did you ever see Tylee again?
No.
Did you ever travel to Idaho to where Lori was living?
I did.
Do you recall approximately when that was?
In September, the middle of the month.
And why did you travel up there?
A few reasons. She asked me to come up. Another reason is there was a seminar that I was interested in going to around not too far from her home. And also me and my boyfriend at the time were going to see his son as well when we were passing through.
When you came to Idaho, did you end up staying at Lori's residence?
I did.
Did David also stay at Lori's residence?
He did.
When you got there, did you see Tylee?
No,
Did you ask Lori where Tylee was?
I did.
What did Lori tell you?
She told me that she was at BYU and she moved her in with some female friends or people, at the dorms or somewhere at BYU campus.
And do you recall how long you were in Idaho?
I believe a Thursday to a Monday morning.
While you were there, did you ever see Tylee?
No.
Did you ever hear anyone speak to Tylee?
No.
Did Lori make any other reference to Tylee while you were there?
I asked about her belongings. They weren't in, I didn't see them. She said she put them in storage. She really didn't talk about her much.
Did you see JJ when you were there?
I did.
Did Lori talk to you about JJ while you were there?
She did.
What did she tell you about JJ?
When I first arrived, she let me know that she said that JJ had now had an evil spirit in him. She had learned it from the day before.
Did she indicate how she knew that he had an evil spirit?
She said that she always went to Chad about this information and he would share it with her when it would happen.
Did she indicate whether or not she'd made any observations regarding the behaviors of JJ?
She did.
And what did she tell you?
She would tell me his behavior was more difficult, and she would tell me his speech was more intelligent, and she would tell me he would say things like, "I love Satan." She told me he would, climb up on the refrigerator and go up top of the cabinets, and he was acting just more aggressive, more. She just tried to explain how she believed he was changing in more of a negative type of a demeanor, I guess.
Was this the first time that Lori had talked to you about someone changing once they were dark or possessed?
No.
And who else had she indicated had behavior or physical changes?
I remember Charles. She indicated he looked different. I just not remembering all the details, but she would say some things about their behaviors. She would share, like maybe they would just talk to her differently.
Do you recall approximately how many times before that interaction or that visit that you would have seen JJ?
I saw him a handful of times. I haven't tried to figure it out. Maybe 10 or 15 times in his life. I'm not sure.
Based on the times that you'd been able to observe him, did you notice any changes in JJ?
No.
Did he appear to be a typical 7-year-old?
A typical 7-year-old autistic kid.
And when you say a typical 7-year-old autistic kid, do you have experience with autistic children?
To some level.
And so you're aware, or you've observed some behaviors before?
Yes.
And JJ's behavior seemed consistent with any autistic 7-year-old
Yes.
that you've observed?
Yes.
Did you ever see JJ climbing on counters or the ceiling?
No.
While you were there, did you ever observe JJ act out?
He seemed very upset one day, and so Chad took him upstairs and went into a bedroom with him, according to Chad.
And you were there towards the mid to end of September, is that what you said?
So the day I left, I believe, was September 23rd, so the Thursday before that.
And Charles had passed away.
Correct.
Do you know if Tammy was still alive?
She was.
And you mentioned Chad being there.
Yes.
Was Chad there for the duration of your visit?
He would come in and out.
Do you know if he stayed the night while you were there?
No.
And I'll clarify that. No, you don't know, or no, he did not.
No, he did not.
So when JJ acted out, it was Chad, not Lori, that took him upstairs.
Correct.
And when Chad came, did Chad come back down from taking him upstairs?
He did.
Was JJ with him?
I think so.
What did Chad say regarding that?
He just quietly came down, and I asked him why his neck was so red, and he said that JJ had scratched his neck.
Did you have occasion to observe Chad and Lori during that visit?
I did.
Did you observe their interactions with each other?
I did.
What did you observe?
They're affectionate. He consoled her. He would kiss her on the cheek, hug her. And they had, fun together, singing and dancing too.
Did they appear fairly affectionate?
Yes.
Do you recall going to walk a track with them?
I do.
And what, if anything, did you observe when you went to do that?
Walked around the track with them, and then we went downstairs, and they showed me some beautiful pictures in one of the hallways at the campus. And then at the end, as we got in the car, Lori and I got in her car, and then he got in his car. They were affectionate. He hugged her and gave her a kiss.
Do you recall if you were told anything regarding the secrecy of Chad and Lori's relationship?
Yes.
And what were you told?
Chad had indicated to David that weekend that, he'd appreciate if he didn't share it with anybody about their relationship. He probably talked about it like that, but I can recall that moment.
And were you present for that conversation?
Yes.
During that conversation, did you indicate that was a conversation mainly between Chad and David?
Yes.
Did you overhear Chad say anything else regarding Tammy?
He said that he was still married to her, and I wasn't paying attention to the whole conversation, and I don't recall the whole conversation. He could have talked about how she was a good wife. I can't remember if David told me that or she did, but anyway, that's what it feels like, he said.
Do you know, has Lori ever indicated to you if the date September 22nd has any kind of special meaning?
Yes.
And what has she indicated to you?
She indicated to me that that was the date that Moroni appeared to her in a temple.
Do you recall the last time you saw JJ?
I recall seeing him the Sunday night when he was being taken upstairs by Alex in his bedroom. That's the last time I recall seeing him.
And do you know what date that was?
I believe that was the 22nd.
Were you still there you left on that next month, or the following day, the Monday?
Correct.
Did you see JJ that next day?
I did not. I don't recall seeing him.
Did Lori say anything to you about JJ?
I don't remember her talking to me about him, other than she was talking about some of his behaviors and things like that.
Prior to Charles dying, did Lori ever talk to you at all about life insurance?
A little bit.
Do you recall what she told you?
Specifically, I remember we were in her kitchen after Charles passed. Right before he came to town. She told him, I said, why would he want to kill you? And she said, well, I have, I think she said $1 million or a few $1 million of insurance on her, that he wanted that. But then she said she found out that he had changed the policy and a lot of that money to his sister Kay.
So a lot of the money, if Lori died, would go to Kay, according to her.
Sorry, maybe I got it confused. If Charles passed away, then the money would go to Kay. That's what I meant to say.
And do you recall when she told you she had learned that?
It felt like that was the first time. I recall that being the first time we talked about it, the day before he was killed.
Did you ever talk to Lori about why she didn't just get a divorce?
Yes.
What did she tell you?
She told me that was not the Lord's will for them to get a divorce because it seemed, especially when I asked about Chad getting divorced, it seemed that the Lord didn't want him to because he would be penalized for that.
And do you know what they meant, or did they ever explain to you what they would be penalized meant?
I recall her saying that he would lose his exaltations or his, something to that effect as his exaltations or his standing with God.
Did you ever see JJ again after the night of September 22nd?
I don't recall seeing him.
Did you ever return to visit Lori in Idaho after that visit?
No.
Did you stay in contact with Lori?
Yes.
Did you speak to her frequently, occasionally? Do you remember?
Occasionally.
What about Chad? Did you stay in contact with him?
Oh, yes. I mean, well, he contacted me, but I didn't contact him that I can recall.
Do you recall any specific times that Chad contacted you?
Yes. It seemed like it was a few days in November before Thanksgiving, and he called me when I was in Utah, and he told me that the Rexburg police would be calling to not answer the phone.
Did he expand on that as to why he didn't want you to answer the phone?
Well, I had to ask him a few questions.
And what did he tell you?
He said that that the police were questioning at Lori's apartment where JJ was, And then I asked him, I said, he's not with Kay? And he said, no, he's not. And he had a nervous voice, and I asked him if he was, and he said yes. And he told me that Lori would be contacting me shortly after that.
And you say you asked Chad if JJ was with Kay.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you ask him that?
Because that's what I was told. That's where he went. So why would Kay be looking for him if Kay had JJ?
Do you recall who told you that he was with Kay?
Lori did.
Did Lori tell you how she got JJ into Kay's custody?
She said they met at the airport, and they met together, and she asked her to watch JJ.
Do you recall approximately when Lori told you that?
I would say within a few weeks after I left. I don't recall.
And when you say after you left, are you referring to that September visit?
Correct.
Did Lori, in fact, reach out to you?
I believe it's possible I reached out to her and asked her.
What did Lori say to you?
She told me that she met up with Kay in the airport, and that she told her that she had cancer and that she needed for JJ to be watched. And she said, okay. And that was the gist of it.
And to the best of your understanding, Lori's indication was Kay had agreed to take JJ.
Correct.
And going forward to the date that Chad called and asked you not to speak with law enforcement, did Lori in fact reach out to you?
She did.
What did she say?
She said that the police had come by, and she told the police that I had JJ. She told me to go to she told the police that I took JJ to a movie called Frozen, I believe, and just take random pictures of kids running around at the movie theater.
Was JJ with you?
No.
Did law enforcement try to reach out to you?
They did.
Did you pick up or respond to them initially?
Not initially.
And why did you not respond to them initially?
I wasn't sure what in the world to do.
Had Lori told you anything previously regarding law enforcement?
I'm not sure at this point when she shared with me, but she told me that they were dark and that they were, after her, like Satan was after her with the other dark entities that they talked about. So they call them dark translated beings, I believe. But I don't know exactly when she shared that with me, but at some point she did.
Did she tell you anything about other people being after her?
Kay and her brother, her father, and I think.
And her brother, would that have been Alex
brother.
Cox?
No, her other brother. I forgot his name.
So when Chad's called and asked you not to speak to law enforcement, and then Lori's called you, you don't answer law enforcement right away because you're not sure what to do.
Right. She told me, I forgot to share this, she told me that JJ's life was in danger, that Kay was trying to kidnap him from her. That's what she shared with me.
And did you believe her?
I wasn't sure. I was more perplexed and probably in shock a bit.
Had you believed things Lori had shared with you before?
At times, yes.
Was she still a friend of yours at that point?
Yes.
When you initially made contact with law enforcement, or I should ask, did you eventually speak with law enforcement?
Yes, I ended up talking to Officer Pillar from Gilbert, Arizona.
And the first time you had contact with law enforcement, did you in fact indicate JJ was with you?
How I shared it with him is I said I had him, but then I didn't have him anymore, that Lori had him. That's how I kind of talked about it.
And had you ever had JJ with you?
No.
And why at that time did you relay that to law enforcement?
I wasn't 100% sure she was telling the truth or not, and I felt in a very weird and uncomfortable position, and I really did not know what to do. Regrettably, I didn't share exactly how I wanted to.
At some point, did you end up making contact with law enforcement at a later date?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when that was?
I feel like it was just the very beginning of December probably, or the very end of November, somewhere in that time.
At that time, did you tell law enforcement that JJ had never been with you?
Oh, yeah.
Did you share with them what you knew?
Yes.
This is continuous coverage
Continuous coverage.
in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell from the Hidden Killers podcast.
Hidden Killers Podcast.
There is much more to come. Press subscribe so you don't miss any of our continuing coverage in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell. I'm Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.